With the first updates coming out for it already and bugs seemingly fixed, Days Gone might be the perfect game to jump into now, after its initial launch didn't go entirely to Sony Ben's plan. Days Gone is a game that's had to follow some incredible titles from Sony's publishing arm. On the heels of God of War and Spider-Man to name a couple, it was always going to be juxtaposed with high quality, which going off a Metacritic score of 71 would suggest it hasn't fared well against. The first section of this review will be major spoiler free, then I'll get into spoiler territory later on in the video, which I will warn you about, just in case you haven't picked up the game yet. I've platinumed the game, spent more than 50 hours within it, and I feel very differently to the majority of the critics' consensus. And with a user score on Metacritic of 8.1, it would appear that the general public, who have actually played it for a certain amount of time, agreed to an extent. It has been really interesting to sit and watch this unfold since the game's launch. I didn't personally buy the game at launch. I bought it for £43 a week later, when it had already received the initial poor critical reception. And when I say poor, I mean poor in comparison to the expectations set by the publisher, and fans alike. I would happily have paid full retail for it, and I'll explain why. Zombie games are nothing new, and you could argue these quote freakers aren't zombies, they're actually infected, which is pretty valid. But the game follows the same kind of feel as you find in your typical zombie game. This game isn't the best game of its type in any area really. It isn't the best zombie game, it isn't the best biking game, nor open world game, and it isn't the best shooter. But it is a great game. A solid game, which I feel has been unfairly treated upon its launch. Don't get me wrong, I've had my fair share of bugs, characters constantly on fire till a reset, pop-in madness where part of the map just aren't loaded until I'm actually on top of them, and a few occasions where I've audibly said, oh, maybe people actually have a point here. But that hasn't really detracted from my overall enjoyment of the game, even though it has been a rocky start. The story is believable, and encapsulates what a post-apocalyptic drifter lifestyle could easily be. Deacon St. John is a character that appears lost, with massive commitment issues, but an overwhelming sense of loyalty to those close. Deacon St. John is also clearly a massive Queen reference, which you will find over and over again within this game, with the trophies being along the lines of Don't Stop Me Now. They're clearly massive Queen fans. John Deacon, all of this. Proper fanboy moment from Sony Ben there. Deacon's character is one of the strong points of the game. Minor spoiler to follow. In the story, you follow Deacon coming to terms with the loss of his wife, and struggling to form meaningful connections with anyone in the world, apart from his biker friend Boozer. There are various camps throughout the game that Deacon and Boozer have had previous experiences with in the 2 years of time that have passed since the outbreak. But they are both still very much drifters, and in the earliest stages of the game, that is pretty much all they know. It is implied that Deacon was only interested in bounty hunting and getting through life in whatever way possible since the death of Sarah, struggling to form meaningful relationships with people in the camps. This provides great character development opportunity throughout the game. The camps themselves can feel a little hollow, with only a couple of them feeling like they have depth and are worth really investing your time in. In this regard, you can easily choose which camps you prefer, with each one having its own individual currency system in the form of credits for mission rewards and bounty collection. I'd like more of a sense of home within this game, but I'm not entirely sure you're ever supposed to really feel at home within post-apocalyptic Oregon. I'll delve into the story a bit more in detail in the spoiler section of this video, because it's very difficult not to spoil it. The game feels great to play when it isn't buggy, but I must say the patches have massively improved this game since I started playing. And if you're just jumping in now, you shouldn't really have too much trouble. The shooting feels very Sony first party, but actually a little smoother than previous titles. There's nothing clunky, and it's very satisfying to melee attack the freaks. The craftable melee weapons make this even better, and there's lots of combinations there. I think there could be more, but the ones that are there are really satisfying to use. The gunplay really comes into its own when you get into taking out hordes later in the game. This is achieved by setting traps, throwing explosives, or genuinely running and gunning to the best of your ability. I really enjoyed the latter. I'd throw a napalm molotov into a horde, run like hell, and begin to pick them off individually. The hordes from a gameplay perspective are the most fun you can really have in the game. You do get them quite late on, but they are always there in the game, so if you can actually track them down or you come across them accidentally while you're exploring, you will have a fight on your hands even if you've not triggered the mission to go and defeat all the hordes. As an individual from an audio background myself, I hate the audio triggers within Days Gone. It just feels like it has no polish. A lot of the dialogue seems out of place in general conversation, with characters often saying very odd things, and you get bombarded with radio calls from camps all at once. The pacing is very odd, but for me, that didn't detract from the story overall, which is where it actually seemed okay. But this bit...
Yep. Good one. Okay. Good choice. Yep, that's nice.
That was so annoying. The vendors do not need to react to everything you're buying within the game. It's weird. I want to get into spoiler territory now, and this is where I'll do my proper wrap-up as well. So if you're here for a score of the game, it's a solid 8 out of 10. Putting the bugs aside there. I'd probably have dropped to a 7.8 if the game was in the same state as when I first played, which I appreciate. That is what a lot of the critics were faced with, so I understand what they were saying about the bugs, but also a lot of their opinions were against the biker culture within it and the general story, which I think is actually the asset within the game. So yeah, if you haven't played it and you want to play it and not get it spoiled, go pick it up now and watch the rest of this video when you've played it through. Spoiler territory time. Last chance to back away if you don't want the game ruined. This game would have been incredibly frustrating if they'd have actually killed Sarah. I felt like throughout the story, the hope of her being alive was a reasonable and obvious path to go down. But in a world of twists and the player won't expect this mentality, I wouldn't have been surprised to see them turn around and kill her off when Deacon actually reaches her. After all that slog throughout the game, you find her, they kill her, and they're like, oh, you weren't expecting this? I thought that was coming. They didn't do that, and that was good. I like her character, and it was really nice to see that reunion. The way it played into the militia was interesting too. I do think it was predictable that she wasn't dead. I don't think it was ever supposed to be a real mystery to the player, but the fact she isn't killed off and becomes a deeper part of the story makes that storyline so much more rewarding. The militia are an interesting faction. It almost felt like a DLC questline at this stage. So different to the first 2/3 of the game. Their rise and then their downfall made for a good finale to the overall story. With at the end of the game, Deacon and Sarah actually getting to become husband and wife again, and then for her to disappear into nothingness in the post-game. Seriously, where is she? I think what I want to talk about most within Days Gone is the potential for the franchise. It came out in a saturated marketplace with already a lot of quality games and worlds out there. But I really, really like the world we find within Days Gone. And the way the secret ending sets up the sequel is perfect. Sarah being in part responsible for creating the virus, confirming that it was in fact an infection, and that there is so much to be explored about it. Finding out that O'Brien is one of the infected, but seems like a perfectly rational human being. We have so much more to learn about this progressive infection, and Sony Bend can really make a strong sequel from this. It's pretty obvious with the secret ending that it would focus around these human-infected hybrids and how the infection is evolving. Deacon makes Lost Lake a safer place, takes out a lot of hordes, but obviously this is just the beginning. What lies next can really make this game into a proper franchise. I think what Days Gone suffers from is that this is a character introduction story. You find it a lot in Marvel films when they're introducing a new superhero. In this case, the character isn't necessarily Deacon, although I would be happy for him to be in the future games. The character is the world, and the infection. You have to introduce that concept so people get an idea of what the franchise is all about. There are a lot of unanswered questions about what is happening, and I don't think that is down to poor writing. This is obviously down to plans for future games. Games in which we'll have an initial understanding of the world and a better understanding of the infection from our experiences within Days Gone, but on an even grander scale with so much more to discover. Days Gone isn't a perfect game, but it is a great game. It's exactly what I was looking for, and for a 50-hour experience, I do feel this deserves a solid 8. But really, Sony Bend, you cannot release a game that buggy next time. It was a little bit too much for me to be able to justify. I am an absolute sucker for post-apocalyptia, but it has to be done right. Within games, I feel like I have to have a connection to the world and the characters. Despite its flaws, Days Gone does flick that switch for me. I cared about Deacon, I cared about Sarah. That's subjective, but they are characters that drew me in. I like the world, and I want them to introduce good characters into the future games. I really hope this becomes a franchise, because I thoroughly enjoyed getting the Platinum Trophy within this game, apart from the Apocalypse Drift Trophy. Seriously, what the f*** was that?
Are you ready to ride, old lady?
I don't know, depends. Where are we going?
Wherever the hell we want.